So I'll kind of begin really just with a very brief intro to John Moore's Painting Prize itself. So the Painting Prize began in 1957, and it was only ever supposed to be a one-time thing, but the intention was that it was open to all people who were working within the medium of painting, and it fast gained a lot of traction. And by the early 1960s, it was considered to be, you know, the leading showcase of avant-garde painting in a post-war Britain. Fast forward 67 years, and we're here. We're here now, and its popularity is still true now with painters. This cycle of the John Moores saw us hit record numbers for entries, getting over 3,000 painters enter the competition, which is phenomenal. And the two things still stand true for its intention, which is that it is a painting competition and exhibition for all people who are painting. And it is still arguably, the lead in terms of bringing together groups of artists, the best examples of contemporary painting that is being made today across the UK, bringing it right here in Liverpool. And an example of which we're here to talk about right now with Graham. So, how does it feel being the winner, first of all?
Right, you can hear me at the back, can you? Yeah, okay, right. I should actually have a very pat answer to that, because right from the get-go, somebody asked me on the evening after I won it, did I imagine that when I woke up on September the 14th, I would win the John Moores 2023? Can I stand up so you at the back can see? I can see you now. Yeah. And the woman said, did you think you'd win it when you went to sleep last night? And I said to her, what made you think I went to sleep last night? You know when the magnitude of something is misrepresented or underestimated? I can't tell you how I feel even now. It's been, don't forget, I first got into the Moors 46 years ago, right? And that was a hell of an achievement. Everybody I knew who painted, and a lot of people who didn't for that matter, all thought highly, and still do. And it's, because people kept asking me, oh, have you been trying to win it for 46 years? Which sounds kind of a little bit sort of delusional, basically, or daft. I said, no, I just tried to be in it for 46 years, okay? The point being that I have submitted most John Moores. I've been in it 10 times, I have to put my hand up to that. But that's because I've also submitted 16 times, so I was rejected 6 times, okay? I was also a selector once, about 15 years ago, I think, 16 years ago. And I've been shortlisted 3 times. And I can absolutely say that, hand on heart, that this painting is the right one. The 2 previous paintings which I submitted and were shortlisted for the prize are not in the same class as the painting next door. That's the best painting I've ever painted. And that's a really scary thing to say when you stand up in public and say it. Not simply, it's not out of pride, false pride and stuff like that. It's basically because in the back of my head, because I'm a sort of self-doubting, old-fashioned skeptic, I'm wondering if I'll ever paint a painting as good as that again. The point being, at my age, and by the way, I'm 73, and I've taken on several projects recently. One of them, at the age of 68, for mental acuity, was I decided to learn to play the piano. People keep asking me how that's going, and I kept searching around for euphemisms or synonyms for slowly, and I came across the word glacial. And I thought, that's the world, right? Uphill, it's something else. Anyway, so it's defined who I am, in a sense. The Moors, also historically, from when I was, 46, from 70-something, about 40, 35. Yeah, from my mid-30s, right, until my mid-early 70s, it's always been there in my life. It's an important part of who I am. It's an important part of the reputation I have. And that's basically because I, as a student of 68, and anybody here who was a student in 1968 will know exactly what I'm talking about, because that was an extraordinary radical awakening for me. In fact, I've got to share this with the group. when I told my father that I wanted to go to art school, and I come from a background fairly working class, no paintings, no art, none of that stuff, none of that, bourgeois stuff, as they saw it. My dad said to me, he said, why would you want to go to places, an art school? Those places are full of communists and queers. And I just thought they teach you to paint. I went to St Martin's, by the way, the Charing Cross Road, with Gilbert and George and all of that lot, and it was absolutely brilliant. It was balmy. I mean, totally off the wall. Okay. But the one thing, and so that introduction, by the way, to the art world or to education, has left me, what should I say, sceptical of, and very, very dubious of celebrity and the art market and the way that we misrepresent, or the way the media misrepresents the art world to us, right? I always wanted to belong to a subculture, okay? Now, whether that's the motorcycles I built, because I've been a lifelong, motorcycle enthusiast, and I build them as well, which is, I'll come to that later, because the workshop in light industry is one of those workshops in which I hang out regularly with real engineers, not people like me. So yeah, it's been the most important moment in my, I'm going to say late adulthood, but anyway, it's been important. It's always been there, and it's always been important. And I'd just like to take this opportunity to say, because somebody did ask me last night, was it going to be easy to let go of the painting? And I thought, you're joking, mate. The idea that I get a prize, and a badge, right, and some flowers, and lots of lovely, messages on Instagram, which quite frankly just broke me up, right? As did the presentation, as anybody who's seen it will know. Yeah, was it easy to give up the painting? And I thought, what, for 25 grand? You're joking, mate. And they bought it. I can actually get hold of a utility bill now and not get the squicks, right? Okay? And I'm buying the time to make some more paintings. But not only that, I get a solo show here at this time next year. That's going to be the pinnacle of my career, for want of a better word. To say I'm excited about that would be an understatement. And don't forget, I've done lots of different shows in different places, and nothing comes close to this. Working with the Walker, the Moores, it's been a vital part of my life and that of a lot of other painters in this room who I know, whether they're my ex-students or whoever. The other thing, of course, is that the Moores, the painting will go into what I regard, and I think a lot of other people regard, as the most representative, i.e. the best collection of post-war British painting, or since 1957 anyway, because I walked through there and I remember the John Hoyland, the year that was in it. I also remember meeting John Hoyland and working in his studio for a while, right? Collecting the work. So it's massively important. Okay, I'll stop eulogizing now. Sit down for a minute.
No, thank you. I mean, you talked there about how many times you've entered, with the first time showing in the John Moores being 47 years ago.
Yep.
You've been a juror, you've won it now. So what was it that originally kind of drew you to entering into the competition? What is it about the competition that resonates with you?
Right. Well, first of all, it was the reputation, okay? Because don't forget, as a student of 68, we were down on everything. Everything was wrong with the world. Capitalism was evil. Everything was wrong. But there was one little beacon outside of the art world. Hold on, I've got to correct myself. I don't think there is actually a thing any longer as the art world. It's fragmented. What people quite often are talking about is the art market, and that is closely connected to media and celebrity, okay? Put that aside. What really, the only thing outside, and it was outside of that mainstream, was the Moores. Curious thing to say, because don't forget, in the late 60s, early 70s, there was a kind of, people took the position that if you were painting, you were a reactionary force, okay? The dominant discourse was conceptualism, performance. The hegemony of painting was a term that was being bandied around, okay? Painting was dead. And there was such a unanimity, a chorus of unanimity, that being of that generation, myself and several other people, by the time I got to the Royal College, decided that the one thing we would do to not gain approval, in fact, was to be countercultural, ironically, was to paint. I know it sounds an absurd thing to say today, because that's not the case any longer. This is 30 or 40 or 50 years ago, right? Long time ago. To try and imagine that today is almost impossible. What else was I going to say? I don't know. No. There you go. But I digress,
No, you've answered. You've answered. So
Yeah.
we can contemplate your statements that you've made in lots of writings and various guises about that you don't consider yourself an artist, you consider yourself a painter. And you, within painting, you see so much potential in terms of enlightenment or education and access. Yeah. Maybe talk about that a little bit more, because it's really interesting.
I write a lot about what I see as the crisis in art education. I don't think I'm the only person in this room who's actually either worked in an art school or been to an art school and has noticed. Don't forget, I was there in '68, and I have been in the room, metaphorically, one way or another, until the Royal College, when I was Professor of Painting from 1998 to 2006. Hand on heart, I love teaching. I'm history's witness, basically, that education is transformative, right? And it is absolutely a vital aspect of creativity and a collective creative life. And that's why I believe painting is a discourse. Somebody said to me, well, I thought it was like an activity. I said, yeah, decorating is an activity, but painting, this is something that's going on now in this room. It's going on, it goes on me, can you believe it? You probably do now, having met me, 24/7. Last night, I couldn't go to sleep thinking about this because I've got this tape going, dozens of tapes, almost a cacophony of voices, as it were, polyphony to dignify it, of what it is to be a painter, okay? And what it is to lead a creative life. Don't forget, I come from a background without art and it wasn't for people like us, okay? So I'm one of those travellers, transformed by education. There's not one hat in the education debate that I don't wear, right? Don't forget, I'm a very senior academic at the Royal College. I love teaching because of its transformative power. I believe it's made me the person I am today, whatever that is, right? I'm a parent, so I'm pretty dicked off about the lack of opportunities available to my children, right? And God help their children, my grandchildren. What was I going to say? Yeah, and so I write a lot about it, okay? And I've made myself very unpopular in certain quarters, all right? And I'm very proud to say that, because the kind of people I've dicked off aren't the kind of people I really want to have, go for a drink with, as it were, metaphorically, get it? They're not my buddies. They don't share my values. And as I say, this is so important to me that I feel passionate about it. I love teaching, and the reason I left the Royal College, and I'm prepared to stand up in public and say it, is because of management culture, okay? It's destroyed, it's eroding the NHS, it's eroding police, it's eroding our civil society and our collective creative experience, okay? And I feel really, really annoyed about it. It's being recorded. I want to go into schools.
Yeah.
As I say, there isn't one hat I don't wear, okay? And since then, I've been able to put my head above the parapet. Started in 2006, when I left the Royal College, I started a debate about it. And since then, I've been asked to consult about it, because, as I say, I am history's witness. I've witnessed the absolute apotheosis when working class people like myself had free access to higher education. Gradually, that's been eroded. I don't know where to, I mean, you all know what I'm talking about. I don't have to proselytise about this. Nothing is more important. Oh, by the way, because of the dominance of conceptualism in the 60s, and those being my formative years, that made my relationship with painting much more complex than simply, oh, conceptual art, oh, it's all gone to hell in a handcart, or the kind of Turner Prize false dichotomy which says, do you think it's going to be painting or conceptual art this year, the prize winner? And of course, the implication was conceptual sounds like very intelligent and bright, and painting sounds a bit more like decorating, right? So there was this false dichotomy, get it? And that's why I now write a lot about what's called post-conceptual painting, because I and the whole generation and subsequent generations have acknowledged the legacy of conceptualism. It's actually changed the way we think about how we think. I know it sounds like a tautology, but I'll give you just this. I heard it, I curated a show in Ireland about 16 months ago called The Tyranny of Ambition. You can imagine that went down well. Great title, by the way, based upon the
We have it here, don't we?
Dorothy
as well?
Parker. Yes, it's,
For anyone interested.
what's the film by Stephen Frears? Florence Foster Jenkins. If any of you have seen it, you'll know exactly what it's about. It's about you become creative when you can free yourself from the tyranny of ambition, I think is the line from the film. Okay. And a show of Irish painters, one of whom was a refugee from Syria, by the way, and some British people who, they're UK based, is the way it's normally described, right? And one guy stood up and said, Irish painter, and I've used his quote several times because it's absolutely brilliant. I mean, I wish I'd said it. And everybody did a little 2 minutes about their work, and I paint such and such. And this guy stood up and said, he said, my paintings are concerned with the philosophy of mind. And I thought, oh, that's so good. Particularly said, don't forget this guy's got a lovely soft Dublin accent. I have to put my hand up and say, my family are Irish, basically, and I've lived in Ireland all of my life. And so I have license to do the accent, as it were, badly, by the way. Anyway, I suddenly thought, geez, I really wish I'd said that, because I've been struggling all the time. I thought it, you know, for like, I don't know, aeons, that it's actually something, which is why it's a discourse, yeah, not simply an activity. And I suddenly thought, that's nailed it. That really has nailed it. Anyway, I've got one of his paintings, so I count myself lucky. Okay, I'll sit down for a minute.
No. Up and down, up and down.
Yeah, that's right. No,
Take a seat.
I'd rather stand up.
Yeah, take a seat. So I want to move us on to talking about intention.
Oh, yes.
Because this is also something that you write a lot about and you're really passionate about it. And you say that you are constantly striving to acknowledge intention in your work. So I'd like to ask, well, what was the intention with light industry?
Okay, right. Okay. Light industries specifically. Okay. This is a really complicated, it's not simply about light industry, it's about the last 50 years of painting, okay? What I realized about, I don't know, a long time ago, was that some paintings looked luminous, right? They seemed to have an inner light, okay? And I thought that was absolutely wonderful. The idea that paintings could be luminous, which is the closest I have ever come, and I think humanity generally, in making objects that can radiate light. I mean, obviously there's jewellery and there's cut glass and all sorts of other things, but for a painting to do it, and that realization hit home one day looking at a Manet painting, right? It wasn't things like Olympia and the great, you know, the big, and Je ne sais l'herbe and all the rest of it. It was simply a flower painting in the Jeu de Paume, anyway, it was in Paris, in one of the museums there. And I looked at it for a second, and I thought, my goodness, this is really engaging, this is exciting. Why is it so exciting? And it's because it was luminous. And then suddenly, it was a bit like the scales fell away off my eyes, because I'd always thought that painting was either about class or about aspirations or about identity, whatever. And suddenly, I saw this painting. I saw painting had the potential, and it always has had the potential, to be about light, okay? The way that sound might, or music might be about sound or melody or whatever. A defining characteristic. I take it even further. What happened at that moment was I saw an extraordinary duality, right? Now, most people, connoisseurs, always talk about subject matter. When people talk about painting, they invariably talk about the subject matter, okay? Too seldom do they talk about the object that carries and signifies that, okay? And the way it is done, or the way it comes about. And what I realized is that it was the way of painting, okay? It was something, it had to be in the object, okay? So we've got this duality. First of all, you've got a picture of something that is attractive, exciting, or beautiful, for want of a better word, right? Okay? And so that's the flowers, the subject matter, okay? Right, But at the same time, and this was a growing awareness amongst sort of European intellectuals towards the latter part of the 19th century, that the painting became its own object, became self-signifying, okay? Now that opened the door to a huge transformation, right? This is massively complicated stuff because it's historical, right, okay? But that opens the door for paintings to be more self-referential, okay? Ultimately, to refer to themselves, you know, I mean, if you look down the line, you think, hold on, you can actually see Jackson Pollock coming, you can see Rothko coming, you can see, and in the short term, don't forget, the handmaiden to this transformation, and I'm prepared to say it, was Theosophy. Our art history in the 60s was very, very sort of, it was Marxist, basically, and a lot of the left of centre historians weren't prepared to accept that Theosophy, which, does everybody know a little bit about it, or you know what it is, or, yeah? You're okay with the word? Right. Okay. That Theosophy was an esoteric doctrine, right? That Malevich, Mondrian, and Kandinsky were all inspired by, impressed by. They were followers of Madame Blavatsky, okay? Right. Now, that's not something that has appeared in the history books until about 20 or 30 years ago, when people were looking at, what should we say, a broader discourse, yeah? So that duality, and this is something that excites me about all terrific paintings. You see the object and you see the content, you get it? And the object and content, there is interference intellectually as well as optically. And I set out to paint a set of paintings of which that's not the first version. And this is important. If you go to my website, you'll see that there's, I don't know, Tiernan's or workshop, yeah, with a number after it, because that's the version or iteration, whatever you want to call it. Right, that was the 6th or 7th attempt at painting that painting. And what happened was I noticed, also, by the way, all of my paintings are a huge synthesis, right, of art historical as well as experiential referencing, right? So that painting, it sounds obtuse, but the one thing that has informed that painting and probably all of my paintings is a desire to embrace what's called the vernacular idiom. Now, it's because I was around, you know, I was young in the 60s, pop art was one of the dominant forms of visualization. And so, and it laid claim, not necessarily successfully, to being a vernacular form of expression, okay? Right, and so all of my work, I've always wanted that, because I feel, I'm going to say it, I feel that, you know, when you stand up in public or when you make a public display of anything, whether it's a book, whether it's a performance, or whether it's a painting, it's a political act, yeah? I believe every aspect of life is political. When people say, oh, you shouldn't let politics come into sport or into art, I think, oh, Christ, they're already there. It's socially constructed. That's, you know, that's it. That's where I stand. Anyway, so for years, I've built motorcycles, okay? And I see, and if any of you are curious about subcultural, subculture, there is a film called Oil in the Blood. It is a documentary about the women and the men that build custom motorcycles and ride them, okay? So going from a kind of, you know, macho stereotype to something completely different. Oil in the Blood. It's one of the most exciting, and my wife loves it as well, and she doesn't care much about motorcycles, puts up with it. But she realized what was happening was these people were talking about creativity. They weren't talking about motorbikes. They were talking about the discourse, the thing that they shared, the glue that bound them together socially. You know, Babes Ride Out, as it was called, by the women themselves, I hasten to add. They said that it was like an Instagram group, and it grew into a national movement. And it gave people a space, right, safe or otherwise. Right, so anyway, so I build bikes, and I've raced bikes, and I've hurt myself a lot. And I wish I hadn't introduced my boys to them so early in life, but what can you do? Anyway, so now, I'm not sure, is there anybody in the audience who actually has a motorcycle or who can follow any of, I don't know, I don't want to get into kind of something equally esoteric, but anyway, basically, There is a guy called Andy Tiernan who has a place, it's on the internet, it's called Andy Buys Bikes, and I describe it to people, and seriously, you don't have to be a petrol head to enjoy this. It's a little bit like a bomb's gone off in the Science Museum's kind of storeroom and nobody tidied it up, right? Over there you'll see a World War I, machine gun carrying Royal Enfield, right? And over there is a £250,000 Brough or something, you know, some exotic sort of investment opportunity. These things, they're not polished, they're not presented in any institutional or didactic fashion. You just rummage around, right? Not physically, but with your head, you know, making associations, seeing things as signifiers, etc. Right. And what I've done is I've built, in the last few years, I've started building motorcycles that look like vintage motorcycles, okay? Right? And, well, that's on the table here if you happen to be interested. And a lot of people have described them as restorations. And I suddenly thought, this is really interesting stuff. Here is the line between conservation, restoration, conservation, whatever, and creativity. It was merging. I was creating things that people thought had existed for 80 or 90 years, right? They looked new. And of course, there's the whole retro movement in design, in furniture, in architecture, you know, which is a key part of postmodernism. Right, so I was always go to these places looking for parts. And this one, believe me, it's a converted railway, converted. It's an ex-railway station in Framlingham. And the only conversion was they had to put a ramp in, probably, or something. The rest of it, it looks like a railway station that somebody's stored a whole load of old motorbikes in, which is what it is. It's filthy. The dirt, you can't see the skirting. There is no skirting. There's just this kind of tide all the way around the room of swarf and grease. And it smells like nothing else on earth. A smell that I personally find attractive, but not to everyone's taste. Right, anyway, so when I was in there one day, I was looking for something, and I walked out into the main space, which had been the concourse, where at the end of, because it was the end of the line, like a railway, well, it was a railway station. And the windows hadn't been cleaned for 100 years. And so there was lots of roof light, but the light was filtering through this kind of veil of filth, basically, right, and muck, because nobody cleaned the windows. They were too busy restoring bikes and selling them, you know, making a living. Anyway, I was standing in the window and I suddenly thought, this is really curious. It's an enthralling space. And then I decided to start painting about it. And here was this moment where I was able to take my life's work, my life's passion, and one of my more sort of, niche obsessions or passions, and meld them together. One was informing the other, right? So, and don't forget, I regard all these people who are making these things as sculptors, artists, whatever. They're creatives. They really are. The conversations I have with these people, if you could actually overhear them or share them, you go, yeah, that bloke's a sculptor. That woman's an artist, so on, okay? There's no apology for saying that. I'm not trying to be ultra-democratic about it. The legacy of conceptualism was the fact that creativity was what's important, not whether you painted or whether you're a sculptor or whether you're a performance artist, get it? It transcends that. Anyway, shall I talk a bit about how it's actually made, this painting? Because a lot of people are interested in how I did it. Going back to the Manet, wet into wet painting, and some of you probably in the room know you paint, I mean. The key to the Manet painting, by the way, was it was wet into wet painting, right? And he was using a pigment, whatever colour, and would quite often paint into white. And you get this interference, right? And if you judge it correctly, it has a jewel-like quality, right? That at the very edge, nothing is consistent. We're not talking about doing an outline and colouring it in, right? This is where everything is created from the centre out. Now, does that make sense? Because the more orthodox way of making a picture is to draw the outlines and the edge and then colour it in, fill it in, right? But I suddenly thought, no, that's colouring in, right? I thought, and I had been introduced earlier on to the idea that it was really challenging to make any image or any painting from the centre outwards, not from the edge in, okay? So just bear that in mind. And anyway, so I thought, right, wet into wet painting, one-shot painting, Philip Guston. The late Gustons, again, put my hand up and say, absolutely love them to bits, right? Those are the paintings that kept painting alive for a whole generation. It was a way out of postmodernism for a whole generation, okay? Cul-de-sac of irony. Anyway, so wet into wet painting, historically, normally means you put some colour down, some pigment, and you paint into it with a second. And I thought, hold on, that's not... What happens if I just put a coloured ground down, which is cadmium lemon, by the way, which is the colour of a lot of those Warhol prints, you know, the electric chair series and stuff like that, and the Crash series, and they are luminous. They're ultra, ultra nasty, if you know what I mean. Right, so I thought, right, I'm going to use that palette, and that is not black, it's Payne's grey. Now, Payne's grey is not grey as in black and white, it's a mixture of Viridian, of somebody in the room will probably correct me, but it's an admix of several colours, of pigments. It's not, there's no black and white in it, okay? So when you use it with other colours, you get what's called optical interference, right? Because some of the pigments, whether they be the Viridian or the magenta or whatever it is, or the ochre, no, burnt sienna, right? Umber, rather, in it, will interfere, okay? And no colour more so than this cadmium lemon. You get this horrible off-key, sour, green shadow forms that no matter how you try, no matter how you finesse it, it will always be sour. You get it? It's like bitter lemon. It's got a funny edge, literally, yeah. But anyway, so what I did was I knew the place, I hang out in these places, I've been thinking about them, but not painting about them for 50 years, but keeping these two aspects of my life very separate. Oh, don't talk to my art friends about motorbikes, they'll think I'm a greaser or a biker. Yeah, to hell with that, I don't care, it was too late for that, isn't it, really? Anyway, for that approval. So what I did was, I thought, hold on, what happens if you just paint wet into wet, as in with one pigment? So I put the painting down, and then that's extremely how big it is, and covered the whole surface with liquid, right? Then picked it up again, right? And liquid is very, very, it's very sticky, okay? You have time for it. It's not going to run down the surface like some oil paint medium. And then I painted directly into it, and I started painting from the corner of the room or picture that was furthest away from the light source. So everything I did, and of course I masked up a few bits, so it's very low tech. That's what I love about painting as well. You know, it's democratic in that sense. So anybody who's got a brush, some paint, and some masking tape can do one of these, trust me. Make one of these. So nothing, but it's, anyway. So I started painting, and then I realised that I could paint into the paint, I could take the paint off. So it's a one-shot painting, right? Okay, almost. And then I leave it for a day or two, and I finesse it by glazing it as well, which involves pretty much the same process. I put medium down, and I put practically no pigment, also Payne's grey, by the way. So they're duotones. And they're duotones because that is the, in the 50s and 60s as a kid, I always got copies of motorcycle magazine papers, and they were called the blue and the green, and they were duotones. And the only place you got a duotone was on the cover, because don't forget, I grew up at the time of Suez, and there was austerity, and yeah, there wasn't too much colour in the world, okay? TV was black and white, etc. So maybe there's a touch of nostalgia about that. But I suddenly realised that by taking the paint off, I could create imagery. In fact, I spend more time getting the paint off a painting with a rag in my hand, rubbing it down, than I do putting the paint on. In fact, somebody asked me at the opening how long that painting took. Yeah, and you know, if you say 6 years, and they're going to go, whoa, or you go 6 months, whoa. You say 6 hours, they go, huh? Right? Because it's a bit underwhelming. And then you say, yeah, but it took me 50 years to find out how to paint the thing, how to do it. You know, and don't forget, I'd seen the Manet 30 or 40 years earlier, and it had taken that long to sink in, or to be able to do it, and have the wherewithal. Anyway, so that's the story of this painting, or most of it anyway. Another question.
I wondered if you could express to us a little bit about how you feel when you paint them?
Oh,
Did you get?
yeah, okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah.
Okay.
In a word, alive. Because I've never been a confident painter. I don't think I mean, I know people who can paint who are much more skillful than I am, okay? Have much more natural ability, right? I believe in diligence, application and endeavour, yeah? Because that's how I've overcome what I think of my limits in terms of skill or concentration or whatever it is. I'm trying to work to my strengths, not the strengths that other people want to impose upon me or their standards. In a sense, I've never stopped thinking and being a painter because it's a state of mind. I know what it was like as a child growing up without any of that. You get it? And so when I went to art school and started to mix with people who are creative in the obvious sense of the term, and they were pretty damn creative and start raving, some of them. But anyway, it opened my eyes to the idea that the human condition, for want of a better term, that life had more potential than going shopping on Saturdays or, getting pissed or whatever it was, stuff like that. I suddenly thought, blimey, this is, and I've still not stopped reading and devouring and studying, because I met people when I was a student, and I was 7 years in higher education. I mean, my fees were paid by the thing, but my father, of course, wouldn't pay my maintenance grant, so I worked as a picture frame, by the way, all the way through, which is what also confirmed me in my attachment to, passion for, or belief in, or need to paint, yeah? Because once I discovered it, and I discovered that it just took hold of me completely. There's nothing else I could think about. I order everything through eBay because I can't be asked to go to a shop. Why would I want to go to a shop? Yeah. Because and then I can. Oh, and I'm happy now because I've actually got a house I live in, which is quite nice. But I've also got a workshop, a studio. Downstairs it's bikes, upstairs, and some of you have been there, a few of you in the room, and you know it's a very nice studio with a bloody great picture window out on the garden. Looks like a modernist tree house, right? Okay. And I spend 98% of my waking life with my slippers on. I mean, that's my idea of bliss, basically. Not actually and if I do have to go to the shops, I can make sure I only go with not more than 50 yards away, because we're in a village, to the butchers or the newsagents or the chemist, because any further I'd be a sad old git if I went further in my slippers. I'd be making judgment. Right. So it's everything. Yeah. I think about other painting. I'm in the moment. That's and mindfulness is another aspect to this, of course, which is something that it's kind of loosely discussed. Yeah. But I recognise what that is. And the other thing about it is that in the moment stuff also is something I share with the bikes, because if you're riding a motorcycle and you think, oh, this is nice, and you wander, you're dead. You have had it. So I learned, to stay in the moment when riding bikes, and gives me that focus as a human being. But when it comes to playing the piano, I wish I had it then, but that ship sailed.
So I thought, should we start to have a chat? And I'm conscious of time. You've got some upcoming exhibitions.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Happening, and you'll be doing the Walker solo show, as you mentioned earlier. So what can we expect, I suppose?
I've got my badge.
And you've got your badge on.
Yes. Right. That night was cataclysmic. I mean, Joe here very kindly sent me all the Instagram stuff. And again, I just, how sweet. But I don't have the emotional stamina to do social media, I'm afraid. I've got my website, I've got my painting, I've got other things going on. A floodgate opened, although I just before September the 14th, somebody called Domo Ball contacted me. Now, some of you in the room know who Domo Ball is, right? And she runs a gallery in London, I've known her for 30 or 40 years, and by the way, I've done lots of exhibitions all over the place, and I'm not even going to go into it, but most of it's been pretty disappointing, if I'm honest, and I think I'm responsible for that. Yeah, like show in New York, nobody turned up, because who is this oik from, from South London? Why would anybody give a toss? And why did they do it? Why was I there? I'm cured of those sort of aspirations. But Domo has always been one of the people who is almost unique amongst gallerists. She and I talk about it. We talk about painting. We talk about the real value, the way it changes lives. And we share values. Anyway, she phoned me up and said, "Oh, I hear you're shortlisted for the prize." I said, "Yeah, it's the third time, but it's the better painting of the three by a country mile." And we got chatting. She said, "Would you like me?" She said, "I'm going to do such and such next year. I'd like to show your work." And I thought, "Oh, okay, I'm up for that. That's fine. Jolly good, by the way, she was the one person I always wanted to exhibit with, and I told her that after the event, because before the end of that conversation, I said to her, "Oh, by the way, Dono, if I don't win it, do you still want to show me?" And without even thinking, she said, "Of course I do." I thought, right, done and dusted, good. That started it. So I'm showing with her in May of this year. 17th of May, that'll open. And then she's also arranged for another show and a few other things to go on. So there's another show in London just before Christmas. And then the cherry on the what's it for the prize is the show to be showing here and to have a painting in the collection. But yeah, and there's a whole load of my Irish friends are coming to the opening, because obviously it's closer for them than it is for me. It's easier to get here. Yeah, so my life's turned around by it. And it was just as I was thinking, oh, I'll probably start growing tomatoes or doing some jigsaws in a conservatory or some shit.
Playing the piano.
No, I'd already failed at that.
No, that's great. Okay, we can maybe do one last question, and then we'll. So, what advice would you give someone who is yet to enter the John Moores Painting Prize, or similarly to those who enter, repeat on year? What advice can you give to those painters?
Oh, right. Listen, if you need to paint, and this is really important, a lot of people think it's, where do you start? If you separate desire and need and the human experience from notions of celebrity, wealth, ambition, you narrow it down to something about why it's a good idea to get out of bed in the morning, to have something to really do. And I've glimpsed at something really worthwhile, and I've stuck at it. And and it's not even self-belief. It's I don't know what else to do. Get it? And and I've got an addictive personality. Believe me. I've demonstrated how OCD I am in the last 3/4 of an hour in this room. Okay, so that's who or what I am. Other people have their foibles, but if you need to do it, you'll carry on doing it. And the other thing, by the way, is because I've resisted I'm a hopeless. I don't thrive in the commercial gallery world. I don't have the temperament. I don't even have the desire, ultimately. So I'm a bit of a pain in that respect. But what it has enabled me to do is to allow my work, because it has not been defined by commodity, by product identity, to use that term, right? I've been able to shift the work, and it's been able to grow. As I've grown older, you look at the work I did when I was in my 20s, didn't look like the work when I became a parent in my 30s, and it certainly doesn't look like the work I'm making now in my 70s, okay? Because I'm a different person. There are different imperatives. I've I've been able to do what I needed to do, and I've constantly been rethinking what I'm doing all my life, and that's part of the creative process. That's why for me painting is a discourse, right? It's not simply an activity. And I've got a very, very large, you won't be surprised to hear this, I've got a very large collection of my own work, okay? In a very large shed. Yeah. I'm not sure if that's a good or a bad thing, but they're there. And also the other thing is that the Moors it's basically, it's the portal, it's the gateway to that kind of, yeah, I mean, there's work in this show that is way outside of the general kind of sort of idea of, you know, desirable, saleable, easily commodifiable, okay? And that's what the Moors does very well. And I think just a shout for the CVP, there's also, this project has been an inspiration for another project as well in its methodology, and that is anonymity submission, peer group review, and that's the CVP Prize, Contemporary British Painters. And that group, I can say, I mean, I know of them, I'm loosely involved with them, and they care passionately, the way I do, and the way I think everybody at the Walker does. Any questions?
Well, first of all, thank you, Graham.
Well, hold on, before anything else, because quite often there's normally a sort of resounding silence when you say that. Is that because I've explained, because I try really hard, because don't forget, I grew up, spent my whole late adolescence, misspent adolescence, in rooms, listening to people talk about art and talking, excuse my French, absolute bollocks, right? Sorry. And that was like aversion therapy, year in, year out. And so when I got involved in education, I thought, first of all, you have to make it, you have to have understanding yourself. This idea of jargon and kind of group mystification, it's dead in the water, it's hopeless. The only place you still find it is when you go into a commercial gallery and you try and engage the bloke there behind the desk about some of the work, yeah, you know, and you go, no, 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 and they'll say, yeah, it's really beautiful. And you go, which is a coded way of saying, I know you're a poor person, now get out. I don't care what you think. I don't need your thinking. I don't need people like you. and they're the same on me, and that's okay. I'm cool with that. I really am. And that's why I kept going, because can you imagine cracking it when you're 25? You know, being the bloke that painted, I don't know, red spots and dogs, right? And you know, 50 years later, I mean, you'd open an artery, wouldn't you? Come on, couldn't put up with it. Thank you.
Thank you. So we can open for questions now.
Yes, go. Yes, sorry. Yes, any questions?
If there are questions.
I was interested in, it sounded like you were saying that keeping your love of motorcycling and painting separate. And the question is just really, given the prize-winning painting, have the motorcycle press given you some acclaim?
It's
Funny you should say that.
Funny you should say that.
Yeah.
Young man, where is it? There is a copy. No, it's another one of Backstreet Heroes. Where is it? Yes, it's in this one. Yes. I mean, endless pictures of guys who look like they've just strolled out of kind of one of those West Coast sort of biker flicks in the 70s, right? 15 months pregnant and kind of, you know, drip fist. Right. It's all over, you know, these various bikes, XF and stuff. And, you know, lots of the people in Oil in the Blood have picked up on it as well. Because, as I say, because of networks these days. Yeah. And Andy Tiernan now has a picture of that in his home, reproduction, and one in the workshop, hanging permanently in the workshop, where the painting was based on loosely. So, that's your answer. Yes.
Graham, I feel that you've already answered my question.
I hope so.
I feel a lot of artists
Yeah.
are confronted with this problem of too comfortable being comfortable with what they do.
Yeah.
Now, I was very interested to hear about the vast amounts of research you do, historical, philosophical, literary, but clearly the item that you're clutching in your hands so passionately.
Yes.
So, you know, all these things have an impact to work your way out of the situation where you're in the throes of a painting. Do correct me if I'm being too presumptuous here. And give you some idea of how to return back to that canvas and transform it, where you're sitting on it, looking at it, thinking, I'm doing the same damn thing again. You know.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so you know, sorry to
No, I think that's a terrific point.
I find, and I'm very interested about the vast amounts of research you do. It chimes with me very much. So I'm thinking, you know, with the mention of philosophy and reading the differences between the distinctions between Plato and Aristotle, for example, and then thinking, feeling so refreshed and going back to my canvas, and there it is. After, you know, it could be weeks of agony.
Yeah. Listen, I understand entirely what you're saying, and that. But at the very centre is curiosity and skepticism, and those are the driving forces. Which is why when Stevens said, the guy in Ireland that I quoted, that my painting is about the philosophy of mind, right? I thought. Yeah, and that is an insatiable, endless quest. Because as you grow older, the mind, whatever that is, keeps changing. I'm not the person I was 30 years ago. I'm not the person I was, etc. You know exactly what I'm talking about. And because I have not become a slave to commodity, nobody wanted to sell my stuff, That's not a virtue, it's actually happened, period, consciously or otherwise. I've been able to maintain what I see, the faith in that respect, get it? Stay curious, let things in, because I've got nothing to lose. Yeah. Well, I hope it goes some way. I mean, I can't always answer your question because I understand you're talking about your experience, yeah? And ours are similar, and also similar historically, I guess. Yeah.
Indeed, yeah. Now, the multiple kind of approaches to research, and the way that maybe, for example, I've mentioned Aristotle and Plato, but driving down a country lane where you're thinking of absolutely nothing apart from an escape, possibly, and suddenly things crystallise.
That's a very interesting point.
Probably a bit.
Actually, no, hold on. No, they do crystallise. But if I'm honest, it's probably first thing in the morning. There's something has happened. I mean, I'm old, right? I stopped drinking 10 years ago because I couldn't think straight. I wasn't very good at it beforehand. And when you got a hangover, you're even worse at it, right? Okay? So all that romance about being, drinking in the Bowery and all that nonsense from the New York school, from the sub-Greenberg stuff. Keep that for the birds, right? Now, I find that it's a constant struggle. I have to apply myself to it. I don't think I have any natural ability, get it? That's not false modesty, that's self-knowledge, get it? So I work at it all the time. Take music, for instance. I will listen to stuff called power electronics. Anybody know what that is? Right, that is white feedback noise and stuff. And people say, you actually listen to that crap? How the hell do you put up with that? I said, no. It's because people make it. I'm curious to know what it's like, what it's about. And that's why I wrote an essay called I Don't Like Art. Because I got sick to death of people telling me what they liked and what they didn't like. I wanted to know what they thought about it. I got sick of hearing myself saying, oh, I like that or I don't like that, about my own work. Because I thought, that's not going to move it forwards. And that's where the philosophy comes in. That's where the learning comes in. And basically, I'm not going to start name dropping, but you know full well that the idea of nurturing or growing an intellect is it's a lifelong project, okay? And the word research has been bandied around far too much in academia. I don't want to get into that one now, but that is very problematic.
That becomes the issue which you speak about education, which I've been in very much so. And I've always made a case out for the sort of parity of cognition between art as a practice and indeed, in terms of its rigour the so-called academic one.
Oh, absolutely. Well, the fact that it was actually then had to become distorted, some self-parody, you know, it's because of the dominance of the literary tradition and the literate classes that thought of people like ourselves, painters, as kind of novelty acts, children of a lesser god. It's amazing how they do it, isn't it, right? So then we had to be whipped into line and become a mockery of what higher education had become, right? What universities. Art schools weren't broken, politicians broke them. This is social engineering. Sorry, it's big stuff. Yeah. And as I say, that's why I kick off with it, because I feel passionately about it. And it's one of the very few things about being 73 was being in the room in 68. We had a tutor, Larry Bell's brother. Larry Bell was an American minimalist, worked with glass. His younger brother was Bob Bell, Dr. Bell. He used to fly from America once a fortnight, and we had a seminar as undergraduates on game theory. Next week, we had the bloke who wrote a book on Wittgenstein, right? Yeah. My tutor actually said to me, "Oh, Graham, you're reading Tractatus. Wonderful piece of poetry, I think." And you think, yeah, whatever. Whatever, man. But that's how it started, and I haven't stopped. Which is why, although I don't see myself as a theosophist, I'm curious about why people think about the world like that and can see it like that. And the discovery that, don't forget, not only were Malevich, Kandinsky and Mondrian theosophists, so was Jackson Pollock, so was Philip Guston, and so was Joseph Beuys. Yeah, the rest of my case.
I attended one of his lectures once. Incredible. When he was alive.
When it was, yes, let's touch it right.
Go ahead, yeah.
Thank you. Do you actually remember having an exhibition in Dublin, the Douglas Hyde?
Yeah, of course I do, yes.
Yeah, I remember seeing that exhibition.
Oh, really?
In the Douglas Hyde, yeah. So my question is how do you now see, looking back now, the position you're in now, how do you see the difference? Because those, they couldn't be more different. Those interior still lines.
That's right.
They were really big canvases with the furniture. And I remember seeing them.
They were they were informed by comics, right?
Yes,
right, yes.
that's right.
And they were anthropomorphic, right?
Yes.
And they were still lives that weren't still lives.
Yeah, like the plug was coming towards.
Yes. Everything was animated. Yes. What? And so your
The
question?
question is, how do you now see? How do you feel the difference? I mean, obviously, each art school was such a period of time changed.
Yes.
How do you feel now about those paintings compared to
No.
light industry?
Yeah.
Are they
But-
galaxies apart, or do they still feel close?
No, they don't feel close.
No.
No. Because the person that made them doesn't exist any longer.
Yeah.
And I've just a faint memory of those days. Seriously.
Yeah.
Fun? Have you still got them? Yes. Oh, yes. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Would you maybe?
Nobody buy them.
They were very well received.
No, hold on. Yes, you've got to remember that critical perception, that was a separate discourse. The Observer used to come here, Bill Fever used to be regularly here, and we became friends because he wrote about my work. Walt Disney meets Picasso, etc. In that slightly kind of dismissive sort of way. And so when we met, it was quite an interesting meeting, as you can imagine. So, the world's apart, right? Because what's going on out there now is what's happening to me in the world now, what I think of as important,
I
significant.
just imagine, I suppose, in the continuum of effort.
Oh.
You know what I mean?
The constant application is, Oh, yeah. Oh, no, I haven't given up on it yet.
No. I just had to bring that up because
No.
remember it so
Listen,
well.
but I made them with the same sense of belief that I do this. It's just that my beliefs have changed,
Of course,
and as they should.
I can actually still see them now. Gallery downstairs, because it's great. It's a great gallery.
Yeah.
Do you ever look at your own older one?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Well, I've got a very large shed full of it. Yeah. So, and when I go to see my boys, there's always a painting from 1990. The one set of paintings that I don't see so much of because people do own them are these huge monochromatic flower paintings that I painted. Oh, I remember. Where I, instead of kind of expressing myself, I built them like lighthouses out of, the people who build lighthouses out of matchsticks, OCD, epitomised OCD. So I started in the top right-hand corner and I painted these huge impasto flower paintings, all in white. I'd leave them to dry, and then I glazed them. This is where the Payne's grey came in. And I spent, 10 minutes covering them with Payne's grey, starting in this corner, going towards the light, as it were, and then with a cloth, spend the rest of the day taking the paint off. So it was done methodically. It was basically, I got sick to death of people talking about inspiration and damning skill and work and endeavour. I got sick to death. I thought that was a middle-class kind of trope, basically. It was, it's how they sort of see, oh, you get somebody in to do that. That's ever so clever.
How much are you making of them?
I used to do a lot. I used to do a lot of lithography when I was a student. And so I've drawn a lot. But nowadays, my interests extend. I collect what are called proprietary dies. These are American revenue stamps, and they are the most exquisite etching engravings. And the reason I have a collection of those, and they're very hard to find, I mean, they're exquisite, late 19th century, post-Civil War stuff, American Civil War, was because during Suez, the first time I got hold of anything exquisite was when my granddad gave me obsolete petrol coupons during the petrol crisis, during the Suez crisis. And I looked at them, and they were the first time I'd seen anything that was actually what I thought that somebody had made that I thought was beautiful in my own mind. I couldn't stop looking at them because I thought, how the hell do they do that? I became really interested in something visual, something that was socially constructed, something graphic. That hasn't left me because that's... well, they were coupons, yeah. But I mean, don't forget, they were printed by a security thing, the way that banknotes and stamps are. Yeah. I resist being called a stamp collector because it sounds so tragic.
I think we're going to have to finish there. I know you could... Oh, go on, one last.
Yeah, go ahead.
Just a short one. Do you see yourself as an artistic contrarian? And if you do,
That's...
how much energy do you derive from that?
Oh, the answer's yes, and a hell of a lot. Yeah, of course I do. Yeah, I mean, if somebody tells me, as I say, like, oh, painting's dead, you think, no. Everybody seems to think that. Counterintuitive. That's the drum and perverse. Yeah, I subscribe to both of those. Anyway, listen, I'm going to have to go home soon.
Well, I'm sure everyone will join me in thanking you, though, for sharing your thoughts. And thank you.
Oh, yeah. Thank you very, very, very much. Melissa has, I don't know if anybody's interested, but you can always contact me with my website. There's a little brochure there that was written by a woman who I've known for 30 or 40 years, Monica Petzel. I did a show of the paintings, light industry and stuff, prior to them getting it here. And incidentally, nobody had seen those paintings, because it was in a shed in Suffolk until this show. And moreover, not one of the judges or the selectors of this year's Moors knew who'd painted light industry. And so when they found out, or when I found out, we all found out, I suddenly realised what a wonderful moment, because I hadn't won the Moors, that painting won the Moors. That was a terrific experience, an affirmation of the kind of integrity of the process, but also my good fortune. Yeah. Lucky old me. Anyway, thank you ever so much for coming.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.